What we're seeing with Donald Trump's administration is that Pete Hegseth has completely failed our nation. Everyone in his cabinet has made our country less safe and more expensive.
His bright idea was to share some polling and embarrass these candidates out of the race, a phenomenally terrible strategy that has not worked.
Representative Jacobs said that it would be an affront to our national security to continue to rubber stamp arms sales to Israel. Do you agree with that?
I believe the only way that Israeli families will get to live in peace and security is if Palestinian families also get to live in peace and security.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the San Diego Politics Show. I'm your host, Matt Strabone. So glad you're joining us. We're trying something new here today in our new digs, so this episode is a little shorter. In the main event, my co-host, the editor of the Times of San Diego, and at Easter time, the #1 aficionado of Peeps, Andrew Keats, will interview Marni von Wilpert, who is running for Congress in California's 48th Congressional District. After that, Andy and I will wrap things up with a discussion about the governor's race and about the 48th District as well. Enjoy the show.
Welcome back. We're here with our interview this week with none other than Councilmember Marni von Wilpert and candidate for the California 48th District. A hotly contested race, one of the most high-profile races in the nation. How is the spotlight of moving from San Diego City Council to truly one of the most high-profile congressional races in the country treating you?
Yeah, well, Andy, thank you for having me. I'm a huge fan of Times of San Diego. Appreciate all your journalism. And you know what? I've felt as if we've been in the spotlight the whole time. So, I have a lot of mentors in politics, and one of them is Toni Atkins. And she told me some of the most attention you're ever going to get is when you're on the city council, because you go to the grocery store and people recognize you and they say, we saw you on the news, or, if you're at yoga in the morning. And so I'm already used to getting to see people who ask me about politics and things all the time in public. And this race has just brought it to a national level. I'm already actually traveling the country, talking to people who are very concerned about this particular California's 48th district, because it was one of the districts that we redrew in Prop 50 to fight back against Texas trying to take our democratic voices away. And it's one of the seats we need to flip red to blue to gain control for Democrats in the House majority.
Yeah. So, we ran a story at Times of San Diego this week about how the race changed after Representative Darrell Issa dropped out. And one of the things you said was, ultimately when you talk to voters in the district, they're talking about cost of living issues, real pocketbook stuff, and isn't changed whether Darrell Issa is in the race or not. On that sort of cost of living issue, mentioned that every candidate we talked to said that seems to be the top issue. I wonder, what should voters take from the fact that, your role in the San Diego City, as it addressed its budget last year, was facing a significant shortfall. There was no easy answers. It was either going to be cuts or it was going to be fee increases or some combination. The city of San Diego did pass a number of fee increases that have led to significant backlash. What lessons should voters take from that about how you'll address budget issues when you get to Washington, D.C.?
So, I grew up here in San Diego, and I've watched the cost of living rise astronomically. And so that's why I started communicating with teachers, for example, who said, hey, we're working in public service and we make too much to afford, too much to be able to qualify for affordable housing, but not enough to buy a house in Southern California. So I worked to start the first teacher down payment assistance program so teachers could actually buy houses where they're teaching. And it's working to keep teachers in San Diego. I work to help lower the price of groceries for seniors, for example, who aren't able to get on smartphones just to access a digital coupon to get $3 off the price of milk. But what I've been seeing with the San Diego City Council is a lot of votes coming forward to raise utility hikes, trash fees, water rates, and I voted no on all of the utility rate hikes. I think we can do better, actually, at redoing some of our contract with our water department, for example. And we're seeing that recently. The County Water Authority is able to sell off some of the water we no longer need because we are investing in our pure water system. I'd rather do that, renegotiate our water contracts than pass the price on to consumers that are already struggling.
Nature of the country right now is that this will be a very different interview today than it would have been a month ago because we're at war right now.
Yes.
Let me ask, first of all, I know you issued a statement after the president launched this operation against Iran, but the decision to remove Ayatollah Khomeini, do you support that?
Oh, I strongly believe that Iran should never have a nuclear weapon. They are a national threat, and they're a threat to the rest of the global community if they ever got nuclear weapons. The dictatorship in Iran was absolutely horrible, and I'm glad that that part at least is over. The question, though, is, did Trump have any plan when he started his war? We've seen in his latest briefing, he has no plan to get us out of this war. And Andy, I was a freshman in college when we started sending off troops to Afghanistan and Iraq. And so for most of my adult life, this country has been in a forever war in the Middle East. And that's what I fear Donald Trump is doing, is another forever war. And what we're seeing are the strong repercussions on American soil. Gas prices at the pump are over $7 now. Groceries will be next. Mortgage rates have gone up because Donald Trump started this unilateral war in Iran. And guess what my new opponent, Jim Desmond, said about gas prices going up? He said, no pain, no gain. I agree with Donald Trump. He is so far out of touch with how much people are struggling to put food on the table in this district that I don't see how anybody would feel comfortable voting for a guy like that.
Choose the idiom that you like, either everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face, or it's a lot easier to start a war than it is to end one, but we're in it now. Can't go back in time. So what is the best approach to end this operation, or to get out of this operation, or to resolve this situation at this point?
What we're seeing with Donald Trump's administration is that Pete Hegseth has completely failed our nation, so has Pam Bondi, so has Kristi Noem. Everyone in his cabinet has made our country less safe and more expensive. So what we need is a Congress that will actually stand up to Donald Trump. They have the ability to pass the War Powers Act, and that can actually pull back power where it should have been. Congress is supposed to be the body that decides to declare war or not in this country. And so far, we're seeing our United States Congress rubber stamping everything coming out of the Trump White House. He's now going to be asking them for hundreds of billions of taxpayer dollars to continue funding Donald Trump's war. Meanwhile, people cannot afford childcare in this country. They cannot afford health care. People who are begging to have school lunches restored. For kids who are hungry in America are going to go hungry again because we're spending taxpayer money instead on Donald Trump's war in Iran.
But what is a satisfying resolution to the extent that there can be one? What is an end game that you would even shoot for? Whether you can mechanistically get there, but what is the end result that would be okay?
You have to ask Donald Trump this. He is our commander in chief. He led us into this war with absolutely no plan. It could have been very predictable that the Strait of Hormuz would be under threat as soon as this happened. And that's exactly what has happened. You've seen him on national TV just this week having absolutely no plan to get us out of this war. And the American people are suffering because of it. Andy, after I left college, after I graduated, I decided to serve abroad in the United States Peace Corps. My grandfather is an Army vet from World War II. My father is an Army vet during the Vietnam years. And I decided that I wanted to be part of our foreign diplomacy and try and change the way that America is seen on the national stage without firing a single shot. And we are crushing our foreign diplomacy programs in this nation. We watched Elon Musk come and doge USAID, members of our foreign service being returned home. Donald Trump not only has no plan with his war he's gotten us into in Iran, he also has no plan to maintain relationships with our foreign allies that we had for decades. The fact that NATO allies were sending troops to Greenland thinking that he might take over there is just abominable. This is not the United States of America that I grew up in, and it's not what I want for my future.
To your example, Afghanistan and Iraq, invasions that occurred when we were both in college.
Okay, so we are the same age.
I think we're basically, I was a freshman as well, so I think we're almost exactly the same age. So, but the lesson there is, wars can outlast presidencies.
Correct.
He's talking about this being over in a matter of weeks, but it's not hard to imagine that it might be continuing to go on in 2 years when he's no longer in office. So I understand what you're saying, that Donald Trump got us into this war, but what is a satisfying outcome given where we are now? What is a result that we should be aiming towards in our diplomacy, in our policy? If you're gonna take over, maybe the Democratic Party's in control of the House and the White House in 2 years, and this war hasn't been resolved. What are we aiming for?
That is a question we need to ask Donald Trump. What I would love to see going forward is actual diplomacy and relationships that work. Donald Trump has made our nation into a transactional nation. You know, if we go in and he took out the leader of Venezuela, well, maybe you'll give us oil for that. That is not how foreign diplomacy works. It's built on relationships and alliances. I mean, it would be absolutely wonderful to see a democratic Iran where women have rights and people have their voices heard and there's no nuclear threat. How does one do that if in the middle of diplomatic relations with another nation, they were negotiating with the Iranians, and in the middle of negotiations, Donald Trump unilaterally declared war? And so I don't see how we get out of this with Donald Trump being in office. To be honest, who would trust him? The American people don't trust him. He campaigned promising he will not get us into more foreign wars or more forever wars and foreign governments, and that's what he has done. So we need people in Congress who've actually served abroad in the Foreign Service, as I have. We need people who will stand up to Donald Trump and hold him accountable to the spending he's doing abroad, our taxpayer money going out the door for his foreign war. And we need a Congress that will stand up and actually take control. And that's one of the reasons I'm running. You know, I'm not waiting, by the way, to get to Congress to stand up to Donald Trump. What we've seen in our communities is ICE absolutely causing terror in our communities. We saw it here in San Diego early on with the Bona Forchetta raid in the middle of a crowded dining room. And we've seen it across the nation with the killings of Renee Good and Alex Priddy. So I actually led the city of San Diego in a vote to join in the lawsuit, take ICE to court with Minneapolis and Minnesota to recoup the damages they've done. And Andy, I'm the chair of public safety here at the city. I am very pro-professional, responsible law enforcement. But what ICE is doing is not law enforcement, it's chaos. So I'm already standing up to Donald Trump, and I'm going to do that when I get to Congress.
All right, so I want to get back to some of the domestic effects of this war as summer creeps in. Gas prices are already spiking and expected to only go higher.
Yeah.
Some of the reactions that have been floated from the Republican side of the aisle include suspension of gas taxes to sort of, return at least some of that money to the people's pocketbooks. Is that something you would support?
I would not support that.
Yeah.
I mean, Andy, I've been begging and clawing my way through the city budget to make sure that we get our roads repaired, because the longer we let them go, the more expensive they are to repair. We see that with our libraries whose roofs need to be repaired, and our lifeguard stations. One of them in Mission Beach is literally cracking apart like a split egg. So because Donald Trump decided to declare war in Iran, we as citizens in California should not have to pay the price for that by underfunding our infrastructure and making it more expensive to fix down the road. That's another short-sighted approach that the federal government's taken. It's not realizing what's happening. You know, when he's spending hundreds of billions of dollars on Donald Trump's war that he wants to spend, what about our infrastructure? You know, we were counting on federal grants to come back to San Diego, to Palm Springs, to LA, to all of California to help rebuild our crumbling roads and bridges and highways. And, the airport, for example, I sit on the airport authority. We counted on the hundreds of $millions we got in federal grants from bipartisan allocations because we need a thriving airport in San Diego. And so I'm very worried that the more Donald Trump spends abroad on his war, the less we're going to have to spend here on the everyday building blocks of our society that Americans depend on.
A quick word. We are trying our best to cut through the noise. If you're still here, you are exactly who we want watching this show. So please, click the subscribe button to help us continue on our journey to give you the very best San Diego politics content.
So one of the signature pieces of policy that you passed in the city council was the banning of ghost guns. I want to ask, and you came from the city attorney's office. The city attorney's office has been sort of instrumental in using gun violence restraining orders. You've been, endorsed by Brady Alliance.
I have. What
would be a realistic opportunity for you to pursue some level of gun control in Washington, D.C.?
Yeah. One of the second law I passed actually on the San Diego City Council around gun violence prevention was about how we spend our taxpayer money. So it turns out that taxpayers are the largest purchasers of firearms in this nation because we have to equip our police department with firearms and ammunition, sheriff's departments, up and down the state. And turns out we weren't checking who we were buying from. And so we were giving firearms and ammunitions deals to the lowest responsible bidder. But it turns out those lowest bidders weren't very responsible. And some of them had ATF violations or have the FBI tracing crime guns back to their dealerships, or they were selling to straw purchasers. And on the one hand, I was funding law enforcement to go out and combat gun crime on the streets. On the other hand, I'm giving money to these horrible gun dealers who are putting crime guns out in the street. And so we wrote one of the first laws in the nation, actually, to require anyone who bids on a city firearms contract to actually show us their past ATF and city inspections, show us if they have any crime guns being traced back to their dealerships. And we're using the power of the taxpayer purse to move the needle on gun crime. And so if we could do that at a federal level and actually make sure we're only buying from responsible firearms dealers across the nation, that would be a wonderful, incredible way to not fund some of the gun violence we're seeing. So that could be one way that we could do this in the federal level. I mean, I know that even the Supreme Court upheld President Biden's rulemaking on firearm precursor parts, which are what people are using to make ghost guns at home. So everything we can do, I'm getting a national assault rifle weapons ban back into place as we had in the 1990s. I would like to see that done in Congress, and I will fight for that. People are sick and tired of gun violence in their communities. And it doesn't mean that we take away guns from lawful, responsible gun owners. I'm not worried about them. They're lawful and responsible. Who I'm worried about are people who want to shoot a school, a place of worship, an office building, or themselves.
Okay. And now, so a couple other things I wanted to see if we could get to, and we have a little bit of time left. Representative Jacobs said that it would be an affront to our national security to continue to rubber stamp arms sales to Israel. Do you agree with that?
I believe that Israel actually is one of our strongest partners in the Middle East. And they have been dealing with defensive wars for years and years and years. Actually, when I was in college, I majored in peace and conflict studies, and we studied the Israel-Palestine conflict back then, too. What I am very hopeful for, though, is that we do find a two-state solution, because I believe the only way that Israeli families will get to live in peace and security is if Palestinian families also get to live in peace and security. And we disarm Hamas and take down the levels of violence going on in the West Bank. We need to make sure, though, that we do maintain a strong partnership with the country of Israel, as we have forever in the Middle East. I'm also very proud, as a young LGBTQ woman, that they celebrate LGBTQ rights in Israel as well. And so doesn't mean we can't hold our partners accountable, which we should. Doesn't mean we don't get aid to food and children, to people who need it, and make sure that we minimize casualties in war. Those are American values we have to stand up to. We've had the Leahy Act for years and years and years. And, I will be the second Peace Corps volunteer to serve in Congress right now. There's only one left.
Is that true?
Yeah, John Garamendi is the only one left. And he is, he's aging now. So there's a whole slate of us Peace Corps volunteers running for Congress, actually. And I think it's time we get more people who are oriented towards peace, as opposed to the Department of War that Donald Trump has renamed.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll leave it there. Thank you for coming in.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm back with Andy. Andy, was there anything else you wanted to talk about?
Yeah, I do. So a few weeks ago, I think maybe in our first episode, you took the time to tell people that they should not be wetting the bed, Democratic voters specifically.
I did say that.
About the prospect of getting shut out in the top two system in the governor's race.
I just want to say something quickly about this race. There have been quite a bit of hand-wringing around the fact that there are two Republicans leading in the polling. It has caused a lot of folks to say, well, the Democrats are going to blow this and two Republicans are going to get to the primary. I just want to be very clear, that is not going to happen. I just want to put aside the alarmism. This conversation comes up with every major statewide office, every cycle. At some point during the race, the polling shows two Republicans leading. Everyone loses their mind. Relax.
Now, since then, a couple things have happened. One is just weeks have passed, and the situation doesn't look all that much different than it did at the time. The other, I think, maybe more concerning for you is that no one less than Paul Mitchell, maybe the top Democratic pollster strategist in California, has created a system where he's aggregating polls and has come to the conclusion that there's something like a 25% chance that Democrats will, in fact, be shut out of the governor's race.
How about that?
What do you think now? Should people be wetting the bed?
Well, let me start by saying that my words back then rested on some assumptions. For instance, I assumed that one of the Democratic candidates would have found a way to set themselves apart by now, and that obviously hasn't happened. The other critical assumption I made is that there are still political bosses in California who know what they are doing. Now, let me describe what I mean. A real political boss, a truly competent operator, would have taken a look at the large Democratic field for governor and recognized that a lot of these folks absolutely know they cannot win and will not be the next governor. A real political boss would know that sometimes in politics, you don't run for office because you expect to win. You run for office to make yourself a nuisance in order to achieve some other outcome. And for these candidates languishing in the low single digits, that outcome is surprisingly straightforward. They just want a job. Yes, that's all this is about for these folks. A professorship at Santa Clara University, or a position as director of community engagement or government relations or something like that at some California-based company or high-profile nonprofit, or maybe even some obscure appointed office in state government. That's what these no-hopers actually want. And a real political boss would have had the sophistication to recognize this, the Rolodex to make it happen, and the sense to get it done before the filing deadline. Now, of course, that didn't happen. We're long past the filing deadline, and all these candidates are still in the race. So are there no real political bosses left in California? The chair of the California Democratic Party, a guy named Rusty Hicks, obviously isn't the real political boss because his bright idea was to share some polling and embarrass these candidates out of the race, a phenomenally terrible strategy that has not worked. The head of the California Labor Federation, Lorena Gonzalez Fletcher, was unable to get labor to coalesce behind one candidate. They co-endorsed 4 candidates instead. The governor of California, Gavin Newsom, whom you would expect to understand that a Republican succeeding him as governor damages his chances to be president in 2028, has simply stayed on the sidelines, which is odd because if he would have just anointed a successor, there's a good chance that person would be leading the polls right now. Unless the folks at home think I'm just making all this up. Here's a local example that I know you remember. Back in 2016, Tony Atkins, a San Diegan who was the Speaker of the State Assembly at the time, wanted to run for state Senate. But San Diego already had a state senator named Marty Block. So what did Tony Atkins do? She got Marty Block appointed chair of the California Unemployment Insurance Appeals Board, a job that paid him much more than his salary as a state senator. Marty did not run for re-election, and Tony Atkins won the state Senate seat. That's how it's worked in the past, but the lack of real political bosses here in 2026 means the race for governor is a mess. I still don't think 2 Republicans are going to advance to the general, but I agree, the primary has not resolved itself the way we might have expected.
All right. Well, so it's not your bad.
I mean, not yet.
All right, fair enough. Well, so I should also mention the 48th District congressional race.
Yes.
So we had to talk about that, as the news was breaking that Darrell Issa would not be running. Let me ask you, Darrell Issa's out, Jim Desmond's in. Is the race different now, 3 weeks later?
I mean, that's a good question. I would say largely no. I think we can expect, at least in the primary, the Republican will get through and one of the Democrats will get through. That hasn't changed. I think there's a good argument to be made that Desmond might actually be a tougher candidate in the general than Darrell Issa. Darrell had a lot of baggage.
Yeah.
A lot of people in the region don't like that guy.
I was surprised. Cook Political Report moved that race from toss-up to leans Democratic after the race. I mean, I get it. He's richest member of Congress. He's no longer richest member of Congress. There's
incumbent
incumbent as well. But as you say, he has high name ID, and I don't think in a good way.
No, I mean, I think that's, sometimes Cook doesn't know the facts on the ground, right? Like they produce good work, but they don't always know the specific nuances of every single district. I think this might be one of those times. I think
Desmond is a better candidate in that district specifically.
I agree. He's represented a lot of it. I mean, he's fairly well regarded among his constituents, at least a lot of them. I think the NRCC is still going to pour a bunch of money into this race. I don't think that's going to change. I think there's less to hit Jim Desmond on than there was to hit Darrell Issa on.
Yeah, and I think the things that he has worked on in his career in public office are things that he can now credibly talk about in this race. There might not be things that, a certain type of voter likes, but for the types of voters he needs to get in that district, I think it's stuff that's going to resonate. Stuff about like fighting for cars over transit and, that's sort of like his urbanist fight. I mean, you're talking about an exurban sprawl district, and he's basically made his bones on fighting for exurban sprawl.
He has been the champion of that. And I also think that if you're a Republican or a right-leaning independent, and you feel this same kind of anti-incumbency sense that I think permeates a lot of politics in 2026, suddenly you don't have to vote for the incumbent anymore. You can just easily vote for Jim Desmond, who is not the incumbent. Like you, I think he actually is going to be a stronger candidate for this seat than Darrell Issa would have been.
All right.
So we're all good? Anything else you want to bring up?
I think that's all I got.
All right. Well, thank you so much for watching this shorter episode. Hope you like it. We may try doing this again. And until next time, look after one another and be kind.